like, I'd ask my patient, I'm like, all right, what are you eating? And then God be like, what you eating? I'm like, fried chicken, mac and cheese, like, so I would get quiet. And then I'm like, you need to lose weight. God be like, you need to work on your weight. So like, it got bad, but the data shows this. Doctors who are overweight or have obesity are less likely to diagnose and treat it. And so I was like actually living out this study because I was getting less confident, less comfortable. So I was like, oh, bet I'm going to change this, and I'm going to change this right away, the way I've done it my whole life as someone who has been in diet culture, as someone who went through med school and learned the whole calories in versus calories out approach. I'm going to start calorie counting everything I put in my mouth. And when I come home after working a 14-hour day and I have to take care of a 2-year-old child while my husband's commuting, I'm going to work out at least an hour a day. So, within 1 week, how much of that had I actually gotten done?
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Reshape Your Health podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Morgan Nolte. Today we have Dr. Sylvia Gonsahn-Bollie, and she's a dual board-certified obesity medicine specialist who has personally lost 60 pounds of baby weight twice and has maintained her weight loss for over 6 years through effective stress management, intuitive eating, and running. I believe she said over 4,000 miles since 2014. So she can tell us a little bit more about that. She has helped over 10,000 patients. She's had over 10,000 patient encounters, and she's helped hundreds of these people reach their weight loss goals through her holistic, scientific, personalized approach to sustainable weight loss. And if you've followed me for a while, I'm all about sustainable weight loss and disease prevention. Real quick, if you have not yet subscribed to my YouTube channel or my podcast, wherever you're watching or listening, please take a moment to support the show and do that now. Dr. Sylvia, I am so excited to have you here. Thank you for sharing your time. Let's dive into your story and tell us what it was like to get dual board certified. You don't see that very often, specifically for obesity medicine. So give us a little bit of your background and how you got to where you are today.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Dr. Morgan, for having me. It's great to be here with you and your audience. Always love talking about this topic. Yeah, so my background in how I got here, somewhere I never thought I'd be when I started med school back in 2006, is it actually started when I went on my own weight loss journey. So I was that person who, when I was younger, had a high metabolism, could eat what you wanted and run it off. But what happened was when I got pregnant, that hormonal shift activated what I like to say my obesity genes, because I do come from a family where the women, once they have children, tend to gain a lot of weight and keep that weight on. And my grandmother, Sylvia, who I'm named after, who actually inspired me to go into medicine through helping take care of her, she had a lot of I saw her health decline from the consequences of excess body fat or excess body weight, the disease condition of obesity. So she had diabetes, hypertension, then eventually had a massive stroke, which left her debilitated the rest of her life. So helping grandma through her health journey is what really made me want to be a doctor. And initially, we have that connection because I wanted to be a geriatrician. So that's why I went into internal medicine and thought I was going to become a geriatrician and help elderly people. But fast forward to after I finished my internal medicine residency, chief year, I had my first child and I gained 60 pounds with that pregnancy. And really, I like to say I kept it on for 2 years. And we know at 2 years, it's no longer baby weight because like when your baby's running around and calling you mama and talking, you're not a baby. You can't claim this baby weight. So I had that extra weight on for 2 years. And really what was keeping it on was a combination of poor stress management. Like I was such a people pleaser. I was such a perfectionist. I was really catering to everyone's needs, especially this new human that I have, like above my own. And so all those unhealthy habits that I had when I had a fast metabolism or could burn things off, they caught up to me, because a lot of times with all the weight bias we have in our society, people think just because someone looks thin or has a normal weight or normal BMI that they assume they're healthy. But my unhealthy habits actually started long before I had the weight on. And it really was just that like biological switch that kind of triggered me now to gain extra weight and keep it on. So the wake up call for me was when I could no longer be honest with my patients. And I'm a very honest person, but like I couldn't counsel them because I was feeling like so insecure and like lacking confidence because I wasn't living this lifestyle I was telling them. So, and it really as a spiritual person, God would call me out, to be honest. Like I'd be like, I'd ask my patient, I'm like, all right, what are you eating? And then God would be like, what you eating? I'm like, fried chicken, mac and cheese, like, so I would get quiet. And then I'm like, you need to lose weight. God would be like, you need to work on your weight. So like it got bad, but the data shows this. Doctors who are overweight or have obesity are less likely to diagnose and treat it. And so I was like actually living out this study because I was getting less confident, less comfortable. So I was like, oh, bet I'm going to change this, and I'm going to change this right away, the way I've done it my whole life as someone who has been in diet culture, as someone who went through med school and learned the whole calories in versus calories out approach. I'm going to start calorie counting everything I put in my mouth. And when I come home after working a 14-hour day and I have to take care of a 2-year-old child while my husband's commuting, I'm going to work out at least an hour a day. So, within 1 week, how much of that had I actually gotten done?
It's
What do you
not
think?
a lot, or you were really tired, would be my
Yeah, Dr. Morgan, I hadn't gotten any of it done. I just felt awful. I felt like even more of a failure. I was just beating myself up. I was like, how could I let this happen? I said I would never do this. Now I can't do. And I was talking to one of my good girlfriends, and she actually said something to me that changed my life. She said, "Be nice to Sylvia. I like her." And I like something about that was so profound. It just clicked with me because I realized the way I was talking to myself, the way I was beating myself up and then trying to create a positive change, I was doing all these negative things, all this negative self-talk, trying to create a positive change. It just wasn't working. And so I would never talk to my child like that. I'd never talk to a patient like that. So I started treating myself with kindness, self-compassion, and self-love. And that led me to the question, well, instead of what can't I do and what I'm not doing, let me focus on what I can do. So maybe that might be 10 minutes of movement a day, 10 minutes of exercise a day. Maybe it might be eating grapes instead of eating candy, like, so making some of those healthy substitutions and additions. But then what really, really it opened my eyes to was that everything I learned in med school about weight management was wrong, because a lot of the science that was going on now, we were, by that time it was 2014, I graduated med school 2013, a lot of it had just been being discovered. Obesity was just recognized as a disease by the American Medical Association in 2013. So that means like we didn't learn anything. So that's what led me down the track to like go to the American Obesity Medicine Association, start learning more about how obesity is as a disease, and I eventually got board certified in that as well. So combining my personal journey with also the professional aspect of it, which was a game changer, not just for my own health and wellness, but also for the patients I was serving as well.
That's incredible. And I think it's really important what you just said, that everything you learned in med school was wrong and you didn't go to med school that long ago.
Mm-mm.
So
Yeah.
tell me about that. So did you learn the calories in, calories out model in medical school? And then, what evidence has come out since then? And how have you applied that to your own weight loss and then now to your patients?
Absolutely. So yeah, so that's what I learned, a lot of thermodynamics, right? We all learned the calories in versus calories out, energy in versus energy out. But one of my favorite infographics or things that has come out recently, and not even that recent. So in 2015, the Obesity Society released a systematic review of everything that we know about weight or body regulation or obesity, body fat regulation. And so what they found was that there's over 70 contributors to a person's fat storage, or what I call body fat disruption, so obesity. So, and knowing that we can really pin it, so it goes so much deeper than just the calories in versus calories out, but it also goes to sleep, stress management, trauma, where you grew up, are you exposed to pollution, systemic racism, all of these things that we each encounter that really play a role in how the body manages its protective mechanism, because fat is a protective mechanism. Like storing fat has benefits. So I'm not anti-fat. When we talk about obesity, it's not anti-fat. It is actually anti-dysregulation, anti-disruption, because fat has a lot of benefits, which is why the body wants to hold on to it. That's why it tries to. And so that's been a game changer. And so that's actually what led me to write my book, because as I changed and started implementing all these different triggers for weight gain, I kept finding more, like the more I talked to people.
Yeah.
So like even the list that I have in the book, it has like more like 100, over 100 triggers for weight gain.
Now, what if this is just coming up because I think sometimes weight loss can be slower than people want it to be.
Mhm.
And so what are some like rare underlying things that you found with your patients? You know, if there's 100 things in your book, people obviously go to nutrition, fasting, exercise, sleep, stress. I'm getting
Mhm.
more into like the toxins and environmental thing, but you mentioned
Mhm.
systemic racism. You mentioned a lot of
Mhm.
other factors. Like, what are some of those more nuanced, maybe hidden things that people don't think of that you
Um,
want them to be thinking about?
Absolutely. Let's just go for it. Chronic dieting, recurrent
Mhm.
dieting. Each time we lose weight, then regain the weight, we're telling our body, we're sending signals to our body. We never meant to lose weight in the first place. And so the next time will be harder and it will be slower. And it doesn't have anything to do with your willpower. But again, you have set off a whole cascade of chemical activity in your body that is telling it, don't lose weight. And so one of the things I see, so for every time you do one of these crash diets, or like, oh, I just want to lose, 10 pounds for the beach for the summer, but I don't care about the long term, you're actually doing yourself harm in the long term, because it's going to
Mhm.
be harder to lose it. It really jacks up your metabolism. Now, some of the other things that people don't think about a lot is just like the household we grew in, and like what kind of eating habits we grew up around. Did we grow up around someone who was a dieter? Did we grow up around someone who always made comments on our body? Like a lot of that is some of the mindset work and things I have to work through when I'm working with people. Did we grow up also being in it as a dancer, as an athlete,
Mhm.
because those set up also kind of unhealthy crime and punishment kind of relationship with food. And really, that's another thing. Like, what's your relationship with food? And we don't think about it, right? But a lot of us treat food like that bad boy that we're kind of sneaking behind the gym to meet, whereas we really want to treat it like a life partner that we're
Uh-huh.
building a relationship with. So I think that is one of the things that it really is important too. But there's so many.
There are. And this morning, and for the listeners, we're recording this in October. It's going to be released, a few months down the road. But I sent my members an email this morning that said, what if we stop trying to lose weight? And I kind of, inside the body of the email, I was like, now I'm not, as a weight loss coach, this might sound weird. And I'm not trying to go out of business. But I think that people have that experience of quote unquote losing weight and putting all of the emphasis in a number on a scale and doing some short-term diet or
Mhm.
weight loss program. And it's almost like do it right the first time. Otherwise, you're going to have to go back and kind of work even harder. So you say, so I'm like, what if we stop trying to lose weight? How would our strategy change if we actually had a more long-term mindset, because that's the goal. Health
Mhm.
and weight loss maintenance are the goal. And I think
Mhm.
when you have that in mind, it requires a different approach than short-term weight loss. And so I think that that could be some way that we've reframed this conversation away from weight loss to weight maintenance, like sustainable weight loss, health. And so, how do you think that people might take a different approach if they get away from that chronic dieting and towards long term weight loss? Like, how in your practice does
Mhm.
that look to really coach people to have that mindset of sustainability?
Absolutely. Well, that's my whole premise, right?
Right.
First of all, I say Embrace You is not a program, it's a journey. It's a lifelong journey, right? That is the thing about even when we lose weight, and it's a weight and wellness journey. Weight is just the symptom, it's the physical manifestation of everything else that's going on in our lives. And so that's what the goal is for us to stop obsessing over the scale and
Yeah.
really embrace everything else that's going on in our life. Do we need to get to our happy, healthy weight and wellness? And so the part of the main things that I do is by myth busting. Number one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like the book is called like Embrace Your Guide to Transforming Weight Loss Misconceptions into Lifelong Wellness. And diet culture in the diet industry, it thrives on a lot of these myths. Oh, it's willpower, it's your fault, you have so much control over the scale. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of uncontrollable things that go into the scale, especially as women. Our hormonal fluctuation, literally, you can gain 3 pounds in one day. I see it all the time. If you weigh yourself in the morning, weigh yourself at night, you're going to be 3 to 5 pounds higher. So, like, and I call that scale gains because we all have done that, right? You want to fit into something, you don't eat or drink for 3 days, like, and then you can fit into it, then you eat or drink again, and then you get the number you want. So we have to stop this unhealthy obsession with those scale games and playing with it. And I think it comes by knowing the truth. You know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So part of Embrace You is making sure that everyone knows what's your healthy weight. What's your happy weight? Going beyond the BMI, going beyond what people tell you you should look like or what you should do, and really individualizing that for yourself and understanding all the things that go into it. So it's so much more than this scale, because you're not doing yourself a good service by doing that.
Yeah. Will you elaborate more on what your healthy weight and what your happy weight is? And because I think that it is just a block that women have of like, well, I thought that I was supposed to weigh this much. And so
Yeah.
they give themselves
Yeah.
an arbitrary, often unrealistic number to get to. And it's like they're always just chasing that elusive number on the scale.
Mhm.
So how do you recommend we reflect a little deeper beyond the
Mhm.
BMI chart to find that healthy and happy, weight?
Absolutely. So first of all, I think of them as two separate ththings. So
Okay.
that's the first thing. So healthy weight is facts. That's clinical. That should be a thoughtful measurement that's done, with a clinician who's trained in body fat, body composition, interpretation. That's healthy weight. Happy weight, that's feelings. That's on you, boo. So that's where figure out, where do you feel most comfortable in your skin? Where do you thrive? Where do you feel and look your best and more
Yeah.
confident and sexy? That's your happy weight. So for the healthy weight, let's talk about that first. So
Yeah.
healthy weight, BMI, first of all, I like to say BMI is a lie just because it's just because it's catchy, but
It
it
is
doesn't.
catchy.
It's very catchy. BMI is a lie. And I know that's like what everyone would love to tweet. But I know my scholars, my friends who are scholars, they'll be like, girl, that's not right. So
Yeah.
let me tell you. So BMI, though, its inception was arbitrary. It started in 1832 by an anthropologist and mathematician, Quintlet. And basically, he just made an observation that as we age, as we grow, our height changes in proportion to our weight changes in proportion to our height in meters square. So that's it. And then fast forward 1972, Dr. Keyes was looking for a way to standardize our insurance. And then this is why he came up and with using that tool from 1832 and developing what we now call the BMI. And initially, when they set the guidelines for where the BMI would be normal, it was somewhat arbitrary. It was a little bit loosely based on some epidemiological data. But since that time, we now have kind of used it to figure out, okay, what's the threshold of body fat percentage that you may be at risk for fat mass related disease. And that's what it should be. And notice I'm being very specific and not saying weight, but I'm saying body fat, because part of the problem with the BMI, it just looks at someone's total body weight, but it doesn't tell you about their body composition. And what really matters more now we know is what is the percentage of body fat that you have. Everyone has a threshold that of which fat is helpful, but at a certain threshold, we know that the fat cells kind of smush them on themselves. It causes inflammation, it causes insulin resistance, insensitivity, all of these things that put you at risk for metabolic syndrome, for hundreds of cancers, over 236 diseases. So this is why it's important once you get past that threshold, which for women, we say the average woman is 32%. Then you're going to be at more risk. And then also where your body fat is. So if it's in the middle, or what we call central adiposity, central obesity, or what common folks call, well, non-medical people call belly fat. So if you have belly fat, if your waist circumference is greater than 35 inches, then that puts you at higher risk of disease. So landing the plane, bringing all that home, as you can see, I said a lot of stuff, but that is to say, this is the kind of thought process that should be going into determining healthy weight. It's not just looking at that BMI chart, because for one thing, we know the BMI chart and the BMI, because it only looks at total body weight and not body composition, it has gender bias, racial bias, ethnic bias, and then also in terms of a musculature, so athletics as well. So you really have to take all of that into account. So the BMI is a lie, but it's easy to say. But really what I'm saying is it needs to be specific and adjusted based on your characteristics. And it's only meant to be used as a cutoff point to let you know where you might be at risk for fat mass disease. So instead of looking at what people tend to do is look at the lowest number, right? And then they say, I need to weigh XYZ. So I'm 5'3". I know I look like I'm 6'2" here, but I'm actually 5'3". And so like 107, right? So people would look and say, oh, I need to be 107. Instead, we should look at it the opposite and say, okay, my weight could be anywhere between 107 to 162. This is what this is saying. And at 162, I may be at risk for fat mass related disease. So my healthy weight is somewhere between 107 to 162. And at this higher weight, I then also need to assess my body fat percentage, make sure that it's between 18 and 32, my waist circumference, make sure that it's less than 35 inches. So that's the way that we need to kind of think about healthy weight in a more sophisticated way. And this, I still even think, honestly, I'm a futuristic kind of person. I think about the future. Like, I know this is rudimentary. I think, even 25 years from now, people look back and be like, I can't believe that's how they were assessing body weight, like I can't believe this is how we were even using weight and thinking that it assessed health. So, but this is the start of us moving past that just general way of going to BMI chart. And again, there's so much variation in the population that it really, really makes it challenging. And where, honestly, I will tell you, I've been doing this a while now and doing healthy weight assessment. And initially, my focus was on Black women. But I see that Black women, at least we have research and we have adjusted BMI charts and things like that. But for a lot of Caucasian women or non-Black women, I think the BMI is too low still for them. I think that even the adjusted BMI is still too low. And I think that's because there is so much heterogeneity in our ethnic makeup that just looking at someone's skin color and saying, oh, you should fit on this chart, this scale is not enough. And that's what I'm seeing because, for instance, I work with a lot of people that are of Eastern European descent, and they tend to be a little bit on the heavier side. And so the BMI, though, if I use a westernized adjusted BMI chart, it still makes them smaller. So I think we have to really individualize for each other.
Well, what are your favorite resources? Because like you said, when you Google BMI chart, you typically get the standard one. So when you're doing this healthy weight assessment, just to reiterate those quote unquote cutoffs, it was 18 to 32% body fat for women with ideally a waist circumference of less than 35 inches. And then what about, do you work with men or do you have those cutoffs for men before you share kind of resources that clinicians like myself could use to help people, go beyond the BMI chart?
Sure. So for men, the cutoffs are 17 to 25% for body fat percentage. So women, we get more fat. So, but yeah, and that's because there's hormonal benefits and for things that we need more fat for. And then for the men, also the waist circumference is 40 inches. Or for our people across the pond, I should say 102 centimeters or centimeters. Yeah. So,
I get that a lot too on YouTube. People will be like, we don't have that product available over here. Do you have another recommendation? I'm like, wow, I never thought of that. So I'm glad that you mentioned
people
that.
People are watching you, Dr. Morgan, all over the world. Yes.
So tell us your favorite resources. Like if for another clinician, clinician, where are the best resources that you have found to more accurately predict someone's healthy weight versus just a BMI chart?
Honestly, Morgan, this is Dr. Morgan. This is something I made up. not I made up, but I aggregated and I put together through reading lots of different sources. Which is, again, I'm not trying to pitch my book. You and I talked about this before this, the entrepreneurship journey. But this is why I had to write my book, because when you go through my references, you'll see all the studies that I used to put it together. But I mean, it was a combination of reading lots of different things. So if someone wanted to do it on their own without getting my book, you could look up adjusted BMI chart. Then you would find it. Then probably what would come up would be the original data for the adjusted BMIs. There's a couple out there that I really love and reference regularly. One of my colleagues, Dr. Fatima Cody-Stanford, who's based out of Harvard, she and her group, they did an adjusted BMI chart based on race, ethnicity, and obesity-related conditions. So diabetes, dyslipidemia, and hypertension. So they have, that's one of the ones that's in my book, but that I also use. But so if you Google, adjusted BMI chart, that should be one that comes up. There's another group based out in England who looked at 4,000 English men and women and made an adjusted BMI chart based on their age, because what tends to happen is our body composition shifts as we age. So the BMI needs to be adjusted for people who are younger versus people who are older. So that's another one that I use a lot. And to me, those two are great because it kind of aggregates a lot of it. But if you look, there's even some adjusted BMI charts for the Asian population, which a lot of clinicians are familiar with that now because they tend to have a lower cutoff for BMI. Where they use body fat as a lower BMI. There's also one for waist circumference, even where that changes it based on, again, European descent versus Asian descent. So I would start there if you want to look it up and kind of do it yourself. But again, I did it I put it
You
all
have it,
together.
yes, in
Yeah,
your book.
because
Okay,
yeah,
good.
and pretty succinctly, that chapter I think is about 15 pages or so, and it walks you through how to create your own strategy for your healthy weight. Each chapter, I wanted you to leave with the strategy, so it walks you through how to do it, because it is something we don't talk a lot about. And part of why you see how long I talked about it to you is because it takes time, right?
Yeah.
Versus it's so much easier. Someone walks into the clinic, they step on the scale, you look at one particular chart, you're like, oh, there you go, and you need to be this. But that chart was never meant to be used that way. We should really think about the BMI chart as saying, for a group of people, some people are this group of people are going to weigh between 109 to 160 pounds, but not to say that you, Sylvia, you're going to weigh between 109 to 162 pounds, because most of us may not ever necessarily hit those weights in our lifetime.
Yeah. And I think for me, the takeaway there is know your body fat, like really get to know your body composition, and be more motivated to reduce fat mass, increase lean muscle mass, and improve your overall metabolic health versus just putting such an emphasis on the scale. So I did want to talk to you. You have a really cool acronym with your tools. Sustainable weight loss is possible with tools. Will you walk us through what that means, and then how you used it personally to lose the 60 pounds twice and keep it off?
Absolutely, absolutely. So TOOL stands for teamwork, overcoming obstacles, and then lifestyle strategy. And really, it's for me, like, that was the game changer. So just the teamwork aspect of it. You mentioned I'm a runner. I did not start as a runner, y'all. Like, I did not even like to run. When I started moving again in 2014, actually how I started doing it was I got one of those DVDs on the infomercial. Like, I was that person. I got Rockin' Body with Shanti. I always wanted to
Shanti.
Yeah. I know you. Are you a Shanti fan too?
Oh, I mean, back in the day,
Yes,
right? Yep.
yes. Well, he got me moving again. So I would do like 10-minute workouts, 45 when I had a chance, just to get moving again. But then a buddy of mine, a colleague at work, was like, hey, there's a 10K coming up. Why don't I know you're trying to get healthier? Why don't you run it with me? I was like, me run? And at that time, because I was overweight, I was having chafing, my legs itched, and the skin run together. So the other game changer was figuring out getting wicking clothing and getting the proper care.
Sure.
And so, but I trained with him and another buddy. And so just having that team support around me really helped to give me some external motivation. I also joined Walk with the Doc. And so I started leading this national walking group, our local chapter in Richmond, where I was living at the time. And so just having that external support really, really helped me. And again, the studies show that for people who are able to lose weight and sustain it, maintain it for more than a year, you have to have a great support system around you. So that's why the T is there. Now, overcoming obstacles, this one is a big one, because a lot of times what diet culture says, or even fitness culture, if you say, oh, I can't work out because of my child, or because, my work schedule is busy, then they're like, no excuses. You just do it. You go for it. None of that. Like, I say there's no such things as excuses. They're just obstacles. And the great thing about obstacles is we can create opportunities. We can create opportunities from our obstacles. So acknowledging whatever it is that you're going through that you see as an obstacle, and then finding what's the opportunity around that. So for me, like my son, I was taking care of my 2-year-old, and my husband was commuting. So basically I was taking care of him by myself at night till my husband came home from work. So what that meant was that was an obstacle, right? But I got a jogging stroller. I got a membership at a gym that had childcare. That was essential. I got those DVDs so that I could work out like while he was eating dinner in the high chair, so, and that was my plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Literally, you have to to go sometimes all the way to Z, but whatever it takes to overcome that obstacle. And sometimes I just had to reduce my workout to like 1 minute a day just to keep moving. And then lifestyle strategy. This is, like I said, like we said in the beginning, it's not just about, today, tomorrow, that event, but really embracing this as a journey, as your journey for life. And so again, that took like being very real about what was going on in my life and seeing what were the things in my life that were heavy. Because again, weight is not just a number, it's a story. And so the scale was just a reflection of what was going on in my life. So some of the heaviness was the stress of a job. Like, let's be honest. And a lot of us, we're hanging on to these jobs, these titles, these things, and they're weighing us down. And I think right now we're living through the pandemic, and they're talking about employees leaving and the exodus because people are recognizing what's important in their lives. So that was some of the changes. Prioritizing sleep was a big one that I had to do. And I think I mentioned earlier, perfectionist. Had to release that, being a perfectionist, being a people pleaser, really being clear about like, when I take care of me, I am free to be the best to everybody else. So when I take care of me, I'm free to be the best to everyone else. And so that really was a game changer for me. So those were some of the tools that I use on my journey. And I hope that helps everyone with theirs.
I hope it does. I was thinking about, all about sustainable weight loss. And I'm like, what would make someone unsuccessful with this? And I wanted your opinion. My two top things when, if I feel like if I had to nail down two barriers for women specifically for like what's going to get in the way. One thing is unrealistic expectations, or especially as they age, they think that they're going to lose weight as fast as they are as when they were younger. And so I had a client who was like, my goal is to lose 3 pounds a week. And I'm like, oh, tell me how you got. And so I always try not to be, presumptuous. So I'm like, tell me how you came to that. Let's talk through that. That may not be realistic, and explaining them the hormonal, harmful effects of a 3 pound a week weight loss. And so I think that one of them is unrealistic expectations. They expect to lose weight fast. They go hard. They don't, and then they might lose weight and then they might get stuck and they feel like, oh, I'm so tired of trying. And then they just kind of give up. So it's almost like they put their whole foot down on the gas. They give it 100% effort. That's not a sustainable level of energy to put towards weight loss. And so then they kind of just fizzle out, and then they just stop. And so I think that was just unrealistic expectations and having an impatient mindset, thinking about it as like weight loss instead of getting healthy. And then the other one that I like to say is intentional margin. And that means creating the time in your calendar for yourself. Like if someone's going to get a hiccup, I hear that a lot. Oh, I need to do this, or I just don't know why I'm not following through. And it's like, well, you're exhausted. You mentioned the pandemic. It's like you're burnt out on life. What makes you think you're going to have any energy left to put towards your health goals? And so really dealing with that life burnout or like weight loss burnout separate, I think is another barrier. And it sounds like you had to really do the work to overcome your own, stress issues to lose the weight. So if I had to pose that question to you on what are the biggest barriers you see in your practice for sustainable weight loss, what would you answer?
Yeah, I think those are great ones, Dr. Morgan, that you mentioned. And similarly, but somewhat is perfectionism is how I would
you mentioned that.
Yeah, perfectionism. I work with a lot of women who are functional perfectionists, right? And that serves well in some aspects. Certainly, it makes you high performing and excellent at your job and everything. But when it comes to something as imperfect as the human body, it can really be frustrating when you're trying to apply that same all or none principle to the body. And so, so that is one of the biggest things that I really help people overcome one is embracing the grays, as I call it, like that it's okay to be in the gray zone. You don't have to be black or white. And and that helps with sustainability. But if someone is just committed that they don't want to break that mindset of all or none, it's very challenging to have a long-term lifestyle with them. Similarly, I think the second thing would be not wanting to go there. Like, you got to be willing to get your hands dirty. If you're not willing to go there and you just want to deal with the superficial, which, that's, I think, why diet culture thrives, right? It's so much easier to like deal with the superficial, to act like all my weight issue has to do with is like this diet or this exercise, or because I want to fit in this dress. It's really much more uncomfortable to go there and be like, the real reason why I want to be that size is because when I was 5, they called me Fatty Sue, and that really hurt my heart. And since then, I've had low self-esteem, and I try to dress it up by putting on these clothes. So that's really, that's uncomfortable. So you got to be willing to go through the discomfort so that you can be comfortable for the rest of your life. You have to be willing to do that. And if you're not quite willing to do that yet, then it's really hard to do those superficial changes. I mean, to make a lifelong change, it'll always just kind of be superficial. So get into that root issue of the why, what really is driving you, what's going on. And sometimes it has nothing to do with, childhood trauma or bullying, but like I said, even just the things, unrealistic expectations, kind of like you mentioned, like I was an athlete. When I was an athlete, I could eat whatever I wanted and just lose the weight. Now I'm not doing that level of athleticism, and my metabolism doesn't work the same. So those are the deeper things that we have to deal with to be able to get you to have that breakthrough, lifelong change. And really, it's a breakthrough, because once you figure out your thing, once you figure out your why, it's like, why would I be all or none? Like, why would I not want to do this? So I think
you're spot on with that, though. I have a lot of tiers. Sometimes in office, I do office hours every week. And I always like to highlight when members have like non-scale victories. And I love when people are seeing a therapist or a counselor. And just to kind of hammer home, one of my members recently was overwhelmed. And I think overwhelm is such a common part of like trying to lose weight. And she's like, I just don't know where to start. I'm going to a therapist and I don't know where to start with your program. I'm like, going to your therapist is all that you need to focus on. It's like, that is the program. Like, you're prioritizing your mental health. You're getting the help that you need. And it's been beautiful to see week after week, like her wins that all stem around her relationships, so she has been willing to go there to get the counseling help needed to improve her marriage, to improve her relationship with her children, so that then she's not going to seek comfort from food. And so it's beautiful to see her revelation on, I was taking out my emotions on this person, and then they were throwing it back at me, and then I was going to eat, and then I was feeling shameful and guilty about that. And then that kept that negative emotional eating cycle going. Do you want to touch on emotional eating? And I think that was kind of one of the points we wanted to talk about today. Did you ever struggle with that? Or, what are some of your favorite ways to help your clients work through that?
Absolutely. So I like to say I'm an emotional eater in recovery, right? Because it's a journey, and there are always triggers that can really force you back to that. But that was part of how I cope with stress. And I think emotional eating is one of those disordered forms of eating that doesn't get enough recognition. And part of the failure of that is really from we as the medical establishment as well. It's not recognized formally as a eating disorder like anorexia or binge eating disorder. But it certainly is a very common thing that I see with many, many people. And part of it is because food is an acceptable drug, right? Like, if you don't smoke, you don't drink, you don't drug, you eat. And I came from a background where eating was the way we celebrated, eating was the way we mourned, eating was what we did. And so when I went through a stressful time, that's what I turned to. And sugar is very addictive, especially refined processed sugar. And that's another thing that is dirty to talk about, sugar, but we know that, right? We see this in lab studies, we see this in mouse studies, that it hits that dopamine receptor and it acts like a drug and people want more of it. And so really understanding that and getting to the root of both, I call it so my approach to emotional eating is dealing with both the bio, so what's going on biologically, biochemically in your brain, but then what's also going on emotionally. And we have to address both of them, because when you're going through an emotional eating cycle, especially if it's driven by something that it all boils down usually to cortisol, which is the stress hormone, right? And that's going to then, high levels of that being around for a while are going to lead to insulin resistance, insulin insensitivity. Your body's going to crave glucose because it's not getting it into the parts of the body that it needs to. So that's a little Bill Nye Science Guys nerdy science detour. But you need to know that because you really physiologically, biologically want sugar. Now, what ends up happening is most of us, rather than necessarily handling that, combating it with like a complex carbohydrate, something that's going to break down slowly over time and kind of soothe the body, we go for the easy stuff that we've been acclimated. I mean, emotional eating is in our society, in our marketing. So, the girl that's crying over the breakup, eating the whole cup of ice cream. Like, we're kind of trained, this is what you should do. I'm on my period, let me get chocolate, like we're trained, like this is what you should do. And so we go for those things, and then it sets up this kind of pattern of behavior. So a large part of it is really by understanding what's going on, and then coming up with more successful tools that can help you through that. And I'm a living witness to this. I have clients who can attest to this. We spent a whole session just going through developing your tools for emotional eating, because for instance, last year was probably one of the most stressful years of my life. Like, my dad passed away in January. I started working on the COVID front lines. I launched this business. I went through business coaching class. I wrote a book, all while having two kids, trying to be two kids' mama and a wife at the same time, and those would have been my triggers to emotionally eat, quite honestly. I would have gone for chocolate cake. I already know I would have gone for brownies, cake, and cheap pizza. That would have been my drugs of choice, but I didn't, because I had the tools and I had a strategy that worked for me, and having that holistic, whole person understanding really helped me. So that's what I strive to do, and that's my approach to it.
What are the strategies that help you? I've shared before what helps me, but I'm curious what helps you with your emotional eating, because it sounds like you've really found something that works for you. And it's important to recognize that it's going to be different for everyone. And for me, at least, it was some trial and error to really figure out what worked for me.
Everyone, I think, is good to. I love that, Dr. Look at everyone should be trial and error, and I don't even think of it as trial and error. I think of it as trial and growth. You know what I mean? Like you grow through every experience, and so if it doesn't work, it's not a mistake; it's a lesson. So now you know, okay, that didn't work. For me, it really is. I'm a person of faith, so Jesus is my bestie. So prayer, journaling, staying connected, staying plugged in. I have to do that daily. I go to church every Sunday, or I watch it if I can't make it. Being part of a women's group is something that I added last year. I started leading a women's group. So my faith is a big thing for me, in nourishing my soul, nourishing my spirit. Other things, exercise, movement, as I like to call it. Part of running those 4,500 miles now is because it is such a stress reliever for me. And I find, I see those shirts that we'll run for cupcakes, but I'm like, when I put in this much work, I don't want no cupcake, and it better be
Uh-huh.
a really good cupcake. And also, that cupcake makes me feel like crap when I run. So no, I don't want the cupcake. I'm running because it makes me feel great mentally, physically. I love being in nature. I like being outside. So it's really transformed the whole way I think about food and everything. So movement, gratitude. I started practicing radical gratitude during it.
Mhm.
And then also allowing myself to have indulgences when I want. Let's just be real. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think all the time we can talk about all these touchy-feely things, but sometimes you will just want chocolate. And you know what? That's okay. You can just have the
Okay.
chocolate. The power is being able to not feel like the chocolate is in control of you. Like, I can have this one piece and I don't need to eat a whole bag. And so unless someone has another underlying condition like binge eating disorder or on the spectrum for it or something like that, most people can be trained to do that once you deal with all their underlying things that are going on. So that's in short about the major things that I use for my emotional eating. But I think just being very honest and open about my feelings, not trying to suppress them, is another thing. And therapy, I'll be remiss if I don't give my therapist a shout out, because since my dad, actually when my dad got sick, I started going to therapy every week, and it's been phenomenally helpful. So the combination of that body, mind, spirit approach really, really has been helpful for me.
Yep. I love that. And I wanted to just point out, I talk in forms of reflection a lot. So
Mhm,
I think a lot of those strategies that you mentioned are proactive strategies. You know, you've incorporated systems of movement, systems
mhm,
of spiritual growth, systems of
mhm,
connecting with other women. And
mhm.
those systems help keep you more healthy and balanced emotionally and spiritually, which reduces, the underlying urges to kind of eat out of, stress.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to encourage people too. It sounds like also some reactive or in the moment strategies in there as well that we can tease out.
Mm,
You
mhm,
said the radical gratitude, maybe the journaling.
mhm.
Sometimes it's okay to emotionally. I always say, let's do it intentionally if we're going to do it.
Yes.
Um,
Mhm,
and if I'm going to emotionally eat, I'm going to own it. And I like to put boundaries around it.
mhm,
And then I just tried around or experimented with this that I really liked over the last like 6 months is eating a cookie or eating something sweet in a completely unemotional state. So, you know
mhm,
how we associate food with like celebrating or mourning or boredom.
mhm,
Sometimes
mhm.
I just have a cookie because, and it has helped untrain my brain to
Yes.
think that sweets only belong at special occasions. That's something that's kind of helped me so that I can say, no, I have the freedom to have this whenever I want, and I don't have to restrict myself. Um,
Mhm,
and then for me too, that just have one, that's been kind of helping me lately too, like you said, to just train yourself to just have one versus, one and then another of another thing that leads to that spiraling. And then I think a lot of women have like guilt and shame. And I think that goes back to that all or nothing mindset you said can be a big barrier towards that sustainable weight loss or the perfectionism. So I've really enjoyed our conversation today. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before you share a little bit more about where people can learn about you?
Sure, sure. No, I think this has been phenomenal, and it's just so great to see another like-minded practitioner. Like, and there's so much work to do, right? Like,
I know.
and I think what I would really want to just say to your audience, it's not your fault. It is
Mhm.
not your fault. Um, there's a whole system around us thinking this way, the way we act, the way we eat. It has to do with food marketing. It has to do with where we grew up. It has to do with so much more than you. And yes, that combined with some of what you've been through and your personality, but it's not all your fault. And so just release the guilt, release the shame, and really, really dig deep and feel free to embrace you.
Yeah,
So,
I was just going to say, and embrace you. I was going to plug that at the end there. Thank you. So
yeah.
where can we learn more about you and purchase your book and learn about your coaching and your program?
Absolutely. So you can head over to my website, which is www.embraceyouweightloss.com. And it will have, you'll be able to find out everything about me. I also have a complimentary virtual book club for the Embrace You book. And so you'll get personalized emails each week, and it'll tell you when we're doing our next like Zoom call, webinar, book club, or on Clubhouse, and any live book signings as well. And then the coaching program, it's going to reopen in January. We'll start doing complimentary consultations in December. And there's a tab there for a complimentary consultation, and then we'll just set up one and talk. And if they have any problems, go ahead and just reach out to the contact us, and I'll be sure to get back, or my team will get back.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Sylvia, thank you so much for joining us today. And again, we'll push this one up to December. So if people are really interested in working with you, they don't have to wait for the next 3-month cycle. I just so appreciate your time and your expertise and your experience. I mean, I think it's awesome. Just the proof that you bring of losing 60 pounds twice, of being consistent with movement, of being consistent with your stress management, and with really prioritizing your health. I think it's a beautiful example that you're living. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for the work you do. And so great to connect with you, and blessings to your audience.
Thank you. Bye.